And we are live. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. Before we get started, this is going to be the Polite Society podcast. We're going to be recording episode 334. Before we get going, I do need to mention our advertisers, Concealment Solutions, Crusader Weaponry, New Jersey Second Amendment Society, and the Firearm Safety Institute. Also, our title sponsor, the Firearms Policy Coalition. Again, this is episode 334. We've got a little bit of a different lineup today. Things are going to be running a little bit differently. So just kind of sit back, hang on, enjoy with the sausage getting made. As far as when we do the intro, guys, we always lead off with Rob, and I think Rachel, since you're a regular co-host, we're gonna go Rob, Rachel, and then we'll go with our three guests. I'll go Tatiana first, and then Dr. Edeen, and then George, and then I'll bring up the tail end and throw to a commercial.
You don't want to do it the way it's written?
It's written up already? I haven't even looked at show notes yet. Okay, we got...
Hey, Rachel, is that how you spell your sister's name?
Rob, Rachel.
Yes, it is.
We'll do it that way.
Whoops.
I'm sorry.
I'll fix it.
You don't have to. I was just going to say, that's an interesting... I hadn't seen that one before.
That was a
okay, so
typo.
We'll go Rob, Rachel, George, Tatiana, Dr. Edeen, and me. Okay. Make sure I'm getting levels. Yep, we're ready to go there. And rolling. Hi, and welcome to the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Firearms Policy Coalition. We're recording this one live Sunday, June 21st, 2015. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse. And on tonight's show, we'll talk about the murders in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Emmanuel AME Church.
I'm Rachel Malone, and we will share good news for Texas knife owners.
I'm George Hill, and we'll talk with Dan Roberts about the ongoing protests at the homes of anti-right politicians in New Jersey.
I'm Tatiana Whitlock, and we will also interview Carl Chin about security in churches and synagogues.
I'm John Edeen, and we have our weekly news and examples of defensive gun use. So climb aboard.
Oh, my line. Buckle up. Sorry.
And hang on.
Episode 334 of the Polite Society podcast starts right now. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. The personal news segment. As you heard in the intro, we got a little bit of a different lineup today, but we're going to start like we usually do with Rob. What's been up with you since the last time we've been on the air, man?
I got to mentor a first shots class. Big deal, right? Except this was for a group of staffers and councilmen from San Diego City Hall.
Nice. So how'd that go? Rob.
Afterward, the mentors and instructors and us went out to dinner. Found out that one of the mentors...
Rob, we lost you.
Let me turn off my video and I'll do it again.
Yeah, if you would, please. Just all the way from the beginning.
You rolling?
Yep, go ahead. Whenever. Well, let me throw it to you again so I know where to edit at. Let's go ahead and start where we usually do. We have a bit of easy for me to say. Let's go ahead and start where we usually do. Well, we got a little bit of a different lineup, but Rob, you're up first. What's been up with you since the last time we've been on the air, man?
I mentored a first shots class, which is normally not such a big deal. This one was interesting. We had a group of staffers and councilmen from the San Diego City Hall. That was pretty interesting, particularly how their attitudes changed. You know, one of them saw a shotgun hitting a paper target at 10 yards and kind of looked over and go, "That's legal in California?" I go, "That's legal everywhere, buddy."
Wow.
Also, afterwards, the mentors and instructors, we went out to have dinner together. I found out one of them listens to our podcast. That's always a thrill to meet a listener.
Yeah.
One of our local gun ranges has been trying for, well, a local gun shop has been trying to put a gun range in back. It's in an industrial area. He already owns the building, and he couldn't get a variance from the city. So we've started a petition, what's it called? Well, a citizens initiative to rezone gun ranges as fitting into any industrial areas in Carlsbad, California. I gave them some money and some money to the New Jersey recall effort to remove Senator Sweeney. In personal news coming up this week, I'm scheduled to be on Lock and Load Radio on Friday, and Saturday we'll mentor another 20 students. These are a bunch of medical professionals that a doctor keeps pulling out of his hospital. I think that's awesome.
Yay!
Yeah.
You like that, John?
We need more doctors shooting. Absolutely.
So the listener, was that somebody in City Hall in San Diego that you said was the listener, or was that somebody that was helping mentor?
He was one of the mentors.
Okay.
Rachel, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was hoping it was one of the City Hall people that infected.
That's our next goal, right?
There you go.
Rachel, what's up with you?
Well, I'm so glad to be back on the podcast today. It's been quite a little while. The past few months I've been taking care of my 10-year-old brother, as well as working through some of the biggest music jobs of the year. Those usually come up in May. And, of course, trying to have some political involvement as we finished out the session and got some bills through. The past several weeks, my two youngest brothers and my sister Deborah and I took a really amazing vacation. We went to Colorado and Wyoming. The purpose initially was so I could attend a couple of weddings of longtime friends, and then we just decided to turn it into a great road trip and vacation. So we went to Pikes Peak, we went to Yellowstone, saw some amazing, beautiful things, and it was just a really refreshing time. And I also enjoyed the freedom I had to open carry a full-size handgun in New Mexico and Colorado and Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. And honestly, when I came back to Texas and had to conceal again, it felt so strange not to be able to carry a gun openly. But I'm thinking we have just a few more months, and then in January, some of us at least will be doing that in Texas as well. So that's pretty much been my only firearms involvement, little bits and pieces of political things. This weekend, however, I'll be instructing.
And I think we lost her.
Rachel, come back.
Yeah, I believe we lost her. Let's go ahead and.
Right.
Oh. Did we lose her?
Hello?
This is annoying.
Hi, are you back?
Yeah, did I cut out?
Yes,
Yeah,
right when you said you were going to do a ladies' meet.
Okay, I can pick
Can
up
you start
there.
off from the beginning with that? Just start from this weekend I'm instructing.
Yep. This weekend, I'm instructing a ladies' rifle course at Battle Road. We have about 30 ladies signed up so far, and so that's going to be a great time, and I can't wait to report on that in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Before I forget, sometime before we end the show, if you want to send me a link, we'll make sure that sign up for that gets into the show notes.
Sure
so
thing.
That people, if there's ladies that want to join that class at Battle Road, we can get that in as well.
That's good.
George, you've been on the air before, but it's been a while. What's been up with you lately, man?
I've been a gun writer, I've been a gun dealer, and I continue to be a marketing director for a pair of gun stores and ranges in the Charlotte area called Point Blank Range. There's a location in Mooresville. There is a location in Matthews, North Carolina. But I live in South Carolina, which means I can buy all the assault weapons, tactical shotguns, and sniper rifles that I fancy, but I can't buy a .22 pistol and transfer it from the store to me directly because that means I might be up to something. So thank you, federal laws, for gumming up the works. But that hasn't stopped me. I've bought 2 guns recently, a Ruger GP100 Match Champion, which is absolutely exquisite, and a classic 3-inch SP101, of course, in .357 Magnum. Love those, and I've been enjoying the heck out of shooting and carrying a classic wheel gun again, which I've not done in some time. So having fun with that. I also consult for the firearms industry, different gun companies, producers, manufacturers. I am the king of the NDA, so I can't talk about any of the new things that are coming out.
Okay.
But, there are some cool things on the horizon from some undisclosed companies. And
all right, you just told us I mean, come on, we're back on the elementary school playground. I know cool stuff and you can't tell us. Oh, George!
Well, I did know some cool stuff Para Ordnance was going to come out with, but that all got shut down. So,
all right.
But Remington still owns the NDA, so I'm not going to say anything because they've got more attorneys than I do.
Well, I can be fairly well assured the R51 isn't in the pipeline in the near future.
Officially, we don't talk about the R51.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see here. Next, I guess, Tatiana. This is your first time joining us as a guest host. First of all, tell everybody a little bit about you and what you've been up to.
Certainly. My name is Tatiana Whitlock. I'm from Maine. I am a mother, a firearms instructor. I'm as much of a student as I am an instructor of the gun, so I spend quite a bit of time traveling the country and tapping into local resources to learn. That's a big part of what I do. I also do quite a bit of writing this year that has really taken off, writing for a number of different publications, online and in print. And I'm also the owner of ID Target Systems, which manufactures realistic 3D training aids for home and self-defense use. And locally, in the past week, it's been a pretty very busy week for me. Been spending a fair amount of time with 2 local veterans organizations. One of them is called Project GoldenEye, and the other is the Summit Project. Both are founded by veterans. One is by Major David J. Cody, and the other is by a Gold Star dad. They are both organizations that require community participation to give back to the families, their surviving families, of Maine veterans whom we've lost since 9/11. So there are 2 programs that are unlike anything I've ever encountered before. They don't require a flash-in-the-pan PayPal contribution monetarily. It actually requires that you show up and participate. And it's really changing quite a bit of the healing process and offering different opportunities for community involvement directly with the families. There's no veil between the community and the survivors. And I've also had the great opportunity to mentor and volunteer at the NRA Women on Target Clinic. That was held yesterday. We had 18 brand new shooters. We had women who were so nervous they were shaking, all the way to women who were just so excited and amped up they couldn't wait to get to the next gun to shoot. So we ran the gamut of beginners, and they all had a fantastic experience. There's nothing more rewarding than participating and people experiencing that joy and get that like crazy sparkle in their eye after they shoot the gun for the first time. Wonderful environment, fantastic program, and it was a real pleasure to be a part of it.
Is this where I saw literally people, what were you guys carrying, stones or markers up the mountain?
Yes, that's the Summit Project. That program memorializes the individual whom we lost in the line of service by having their family contribute a stone of significance to them, some place that meant something, a farm, their school, for example, a beach that they frequented, some place of significance, a stone from the earth. And that stone is donated, their initials, their birth dates and death dates, along with their rank, are all engraved onto the stone. And these stones are carried by volunteer hikers, and part of the program, when you volunteer, you don't just show up, get handed a rock, and climb a mountain. You're assigned this individual months in advance. And it's your responsibility to reach out to the family, to do your homework online, to make a personal connection with the survivors, and engage them to learn everything that you can about that individual. Because when you hike up to the top of the mountain, when you get to the top, there's a ceremony that we do where everybody takes the 5 to 10 minutes to tell the story of that individual. It's a very moving and very powerful experience. And it's a connection with a complete stranger that you'd never really have an opportunity if you didn't participate in this way. Because when you get back down off the mountain, their families are waiting for you. And you hand them back their stone.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Very innovative, very powerful, and it's become, in my opinion, it's become the new standard for what it means to give back as a citizen, as a member of the faithful community.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really like that.
Humbling.
Very.
Well, it's a whole new meaning to thank you for your service, right?
Exactly.
More than lip service there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, next up then is Dr. Edeen, Dr. John Edeen. You're joining. You've been an interviewee, but you've yet to join us as a co-host. Dr. Edeen, could I have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've done this week?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon in practice in San Antonio for the last 17 years. I'm also a Navy veteran. And I have some friends that didn't come back either, so I can really appreciate Tatiana's work. I've been pursuing firearms training since 2010. I'm also the membership director for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and I've been active in Second Amendment rights movement for about 2 years. What I did this past week was I attended the Threat Center Revolver course taught by Grant Cunningham and hosted by Paul Carlson of Safety Solutions Academy in Ohio. It's essentially combat-focused shooting for the revolver. When you take the course, if you've taken combat-focused shooting, you'll recognize some of the curriculum as far as the basic principles. But the big difference is the revolver. Grant teaches you the fundamental differences between shooting a revolver and a standard semi-automatic pistol. Most of it centers on grip and trigger, because those are really the two major differences. And then, of course, you have the reloading issues. There's a lot of steps to that. But in addition, Grant really works you over on decision-making using your visual system to process information. And so that was a lot of fun. Also, we did a little bit of weak hand, strong hand shooting, and at the end, even though you probably won't ever need to use this in a real situation, doing one-handed reloading, which is quite difficult to do.
It's difficult to do with a semi-auto. I can only imagine with a revolver.
Well, a lot of it involves tucking the gun in your pants, so you can see where that could be kind of fun.
Wow. Y'all be careful now.
That's right. And if you have a short-barreled revolver, it's actually more difficult than if you have a long-barreled revolver. And also, Grant wrote a book called Defensive Revolver Fundamentals, and a lot of the stuff that he covers in his course is in there. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Paul Carlson, because he really did a great job in organizing the course. And the range that he had is his home range, and it's actually a very nice facility. And then as a bonus, I invited David Codria to come have dinner with us. He lives probably an hour away from where where we were staying. And we went to this nice restaurant just off of a country club called the Chop House. So we had a lot of fun. We had some really good conversation. When you put people like Grant Cunningham and David Codria, there's a lot of corporate knowledge in the gun community there, and so we had a very lively conversation and had some good food. Paul, do you have anything else?
Well, first of all, Susan isn't here today. She got a new job, and in process of transitioning out of her old job, she's not going to be able to join us today. Maybe towards the end of the show, but probably not. She's got to go to a meeting at her store, and that'll probably last until about the time we wrap this show up. So, listeners, I'm sorry Susan's not going to be here today. For me personally, I didn't do a whole lot of gun stuff this week. I did my normal 70 hours of driving, but I have definitely decided, and I've got it marked down. I haven't ordered it yet, but it's coming probably the next week that I'm going to order a new barrel for my Glock 22. It's a 40 caliber native gun. It comes from Glock as a 40 caliber. I'm going to go ahead and order a 357 SIG barrel for it. The only thing I have to do to change this Glock 22 to a 357 SIG is change the barrel. Everything else internally is exactly the same, whether it's a 40 caliber 357. So I thought I'd try the 357, see if I like shooting that better. If I can maybe get a little bit quicker with 357 SIG than I can with 40 caliber Smith & Wesson as far as follow-up shots. And that's one reason I specifically went for the Glock is if I don't like it at 357, I can go right back to 40, and I can order. Well, it takes more. I can order springs, and I can order another barrel and magazines, and then I can go 9mm, or I could change it to 45 as well. So, but I do want to try some other calibers, and it's just a whole lot cheaper to buy just a barrel than to buy a whole new gun. And I know this trigger. I know everything about this gun. I'm very familiar with it. So that's the route I'm going to go rather than buying, putting another $450, $500 down on a gun. I'm just going to go ahead and just change the barrel on this one. So nothing else really gun related. Susan and I have been taking the last few Sunday mornings, and we use Sunday mornings specifically for a reason. Number one, I've been driving Saturday mornings recently, doing a little extra driving, but secondly, we don't want to be mugged by salesmen, but we've been going out and looking at campers. I want to get a camper. We do a lot of traveling. We've got SHOT Show we do every year. We got Gun Rights Policy Conference we're doing every year. And I would like to get to the NRA show next year, along with some other things. But it would be really nice if we didn't have to pack up everything and go unpack in the hotel, repack. It'd be nice just to take a little bit of home with us. And as well as now with Susan getting her new job, she's Monday through Friday only, with the exception of a few rare Saturdays. So we're going to have our whole weekends together every weekend. And that means we get more time for things like shooting and maybe going out and going camping.
So what you're looking to buy is the Lathrop Mobile Studio.
Yes, very much
nice.
So. And then we did come up with two requirements. Number one, it's got to be on the lighter side because I'm towing it with my half-ton pickup. So it's not the big 3/4-ton pickup, so I can't get the fifth wheel campers, the ones that are just one step shy of a bus. I can't afford a bus, so we've got to go with the smaller, tow behind campers. And Susan said it's got to have a bathroom, and I say it's got to have air conditioning. I'm getting too old to be sweating all night. So that's kind of what's been going on with us. We're going to go ahead and step aside to break then. Before we do, I do need to mention we've still got seats available for the Kathy Jackson class. As a matter of fact, folks, we got a lot of seats. And it's coming to the point where if we don't move some of these seats in the next week or two, I'm going to have to cancel class. So please, if you are interested in the Kathy Jackson class up here in Sioux Falls doing the Cornered Cat training, get a hold of Susan at politicsandguns.com. We've got all the information you need, and I'd really like for this class to come off. We had a great time last time, and this is not just a beginner's class either. She's going to be doing advanced stuff. She runs 2 relays, one for beginner shooters, one for the more advanced shooters. If you're a more advanced shooter, you're going to be learning things beyond what the basic shooter learns. So please give us a shout, Susan at politicsandguns.com. and we'll get that information out to you, get you signed up for the class. We are going to step aside to break then, and when we come back, we've got news. We'll get to that news right after this. That was a little long for an intro, but it'll let it down fine.
Awesome. I've got to step out. I've got to check on the pulled pork I've got going on the Weber. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. Okay.
That's fine. If we're going, just kind of step in whenever you feel like it.
Oh, since Susan's not here, are you going to assign reading?
Yeah. Let me. For our new people with us, we do the show in 15-minute segments, and so when I get close to 15, I will jump in and throw to break. And so I don't want to throw the reading onto the new people though. How about I'll take the first news segment. Rob, you want to do second news segment?
I'm sure.
Rachel, if we get to it, the third. If not, do you want to take DGUs?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I got to get to the right section of the show notes. Okay. Is everybody ready? I'm hearing crickets. Rob,
Sure.
are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Get on with it already.
Here we
I'm
go.
just sitting here.
Okay. And folks, really, when you've got an opinion, jump in. I'm not the greatest at digging into people for info, so if you've got an opinion, just jump in.
Okay, I am definitely going to have some stuff to say regarding the Charleston shooting.
Oh, I'm sure we all are. That may be a statement in and of itself.
Yeah.
So here we go. Coming back in 5. Hey, and welcome back to the news segment of the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. This is our first news segment. First, leading the news. I mean, we got to lead with this. The staff of the Polite Society podcast would like to extend our sincere condolences to the friends, family, congregation, and community of the 9 victims of the Charleston AME Church. We count ourselves as part of the community that is grieving for their loss. We surely condemn the evil that raised its head in that holy place. The investigation of that shooting continues. That had barely started before Obama had rushed to his teleprompter to push his agenda of division and gun control. Instead of acting to heal, he did the opposite, according to Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. Quote, I think it was completely shameful. Within 24 hours, we've got the president trying to score cheap political points, end quote, Jindal observed. During the 7-minute prepared statement, Obama said, quote, at some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency, and it is in our power to do something about it, end quote. Obama is mistaken in those statements. No, let's be honest, he lied. Most, if not all, advanced countries endure mass killings. Evil respects no borders. Countries like Finland, Russia, Germany, France, and England have endured these tragedies, some much worse than Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Charleston together. We see mass murders with weapons in countries with far more oppressive gun laws than U.S., and Obama certainly does not have the constitutional power in his pen and phone to override Congress and the will of the people.
Let's stop there for a second, Paul.
Yes, sir.
I'm afraid we have a president who can do anything that 40 Democratic senators will tolerate. He can do anything he wants. Constitution be damned. As long as you have 40 senators who will stop him from being impeached. What is to stop him if he says, oh, after this, the Second Amendment, that's old-fashioned?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But
I'd like to think we had Congress with a backbone, but I'd need some evidence.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
House has the power of the purse, but they refuse to use it because they don't have a spine. The leadership has no spine.
well,
If they have a spine, the American people have to give it to them.
Yeah, the leadership in neither house has a spine. Neither Boehner nor McConnell are well, they're both rhinos. I mean, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Well, continuing on then, the host of federal and state laws also. Wait a minute, I'm in the wrong area. If one of the 12 people present had been armed, the AME massacre might have ended very differently. At fearsome odds, Aaron Goyton, Jesse Awesome, and Carl Van Wyck stopped attacks in their churches. These are just a few of the pastors and parishioners who have successfully defended the lives of their flock. Unfortunately, South Carolina makes it illegal to carry a concealed weapon into a church without permission. Good people were disarmed and helpless when evil intruded into their sanctuary. The host of federal and state laws also failed the victims. Official information is hard to come by, but the killer apparently was able to obtain his weapon over the counter despite his drug addiction and several felony arrests. He had violated a host of laws possessing, concealing, and transporting the gun. 911 also failed. The police arrived entirely too late. The killer had enough time to taunt his victims, expanded 6 magazines, and then made good his escape. The only thing that could have stopped the hateful spree was a good guy with a gun. Obama made his comments moments before jetting off to attend 3 Hollywood fundraisers and put in another round or 2 of golf. At one $33,400 a plate function, Obama discussed his plans for gun control with the entertainment industry elite. After all, Matthew Perry knows everything about guns. One of the Polite Society's core philosophies is that good guys with guns do good things. Carry your CCW if you can, where you can, when you can. Stand free as men and women, not as victims. Stand. And I would like to mention this. And I'm going out on a limb here. I cannot say don't carry where you're not allowed to. But what if one person in that church, even though they weren't allowed to carry, was carrying?
I think that's a really important question that we should consider. I also think, to me, this story raises some issues even apart from the legal issue of being allowed to carry. Just some issues that Christian or church-going gun carriers need to have already considered, foremost of which is probably, is it appropriate to carry in church? For me, that answer is simple, but I think it does require thinking through. See, I'm a Christian all week. I worship God and I seek to serve Him all week. So to me, I feel that if it was inappropriate to carry at church, that would also make it inappropriate to carry away from church all week. But I believe loving and worshiping God involves valuing what He values. He created life, and that life is precious and it's valuable. I believe in the principle of self-defense, not out of spite or vengeance or selfishness or taking revenge, but I believe in the principle of self-defense because God made me in His image, and I, as a person, have value. And I believe in protecting others' lives if the situation arises, because they, as people made in God's image, also have value, and that's part of loving my neighbor as myself. And I believe if another person devalues human life by trying to extinguish it, for example, pulling a gun and beginning to murder people, I believe it's good and right to protect that innocent life, even if it means taking the life of the killer, because that's valuing justice, which God also values, as well as valuing innocent human life. So I see value and rightness in welcoming a stranger into one's midst for a prayer meeting and extending the love of Christ to him. But I also see value and rightness in carrying a firearm and being ready to use it to defend life, and that involves both physically ready, having a weapon, but also having a mindset of being ready to use it, being mentally prepared. I think what it comes down to is a choice. We care about safety, and we make choices based on protection and safety. But at the same time, I'm not going to just hole up in my house or in some barricaded room and never go out anywhere, and always wear full body armor and never go anywhere at night just because that might be possibly the safest thing to do. So it comes down to a choice of weighing safety, but also living life and enjoying freedom and sharing and loving others, even if that means putting myself in a slightly more vulnerable situation. So I think there are a lot of choices that go into effect, but also just it brings up the issue of what you value.
That's a good point. The right to self-defense, that doesn't stop at the church door. And the loophole with South Carolina law is that you can carry into a church if you have permission. So I would suggest to anybody who is a church going person on Sundays to seek out that permission from the pastor or bishop or whoever it is that is in charge of your congregation. Get that permission, get it in writing, and keep that with your concealed carry permit. So if anything does happen, you've got it documented that it was permission and it's not just a verbal. So that's a good situation. I'm with Rachel on this. I'm LDS, commonly known as Mormons. I'm a Mormon, and we believe that it's actually a moral obligation. It's not just right or wrong. It's a moral obligation for you to protect those that God put into your care. That means your children, your spouse, whoever you can. If you have the means to protect yourself and others, then do so. We believe this very strongly. There's a story in the Book of Mormon about the title. It's called the Title of Liberty, and it's a beautiful story about a military officer who is tasked with defending his people. Jesus himself in the Bible said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and get one. The whole thing about turning your other cheek, well, maybe that's if somebody's harassing you, slapping you. If somebody's threatening your life, though, let me put it this way. If somebody threatens the life of one of my kids, I will snatch yours from you. That I will not stand for that, and I feel completely justified in that position. Some people have said, though, and have questioned, if you're a Christian, how can you even own a gun? Well, I think Jesus told me.
George, I want to give you even more credit than that, and I think I want to give everybody in this roundtable discussion more credit than that. I'm really proud to know you. Everyone on this program has taken training, and argue with me if I'm wrong. When you heard this news, part of you went, I wish I were sitting in that prayer circle and carrying.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, that tells me about what each of you value. And that's what kind of got me angry. On one hand, we're told that all values are the same. And in this case, this crazy, paranoid, racist idiot, well, all of those choices are just a lifestyle choice? I don't think so. I think values matter, and this kid was crazy, and I'm proud to know the people I'm talking to right now.
It's an interesting topic. Specifically, I'm a mother. I have 2 small children, and I carry concealed every day. It's a small percentage of the time that I don't have my gun on me or readily accessible, and those are the places and spaces I'm going to that I legally cannot carry in. And so those are the only times that I really don't have a gun on me. And when I became a mother, and then when I very soon thereafter started training for firearms and self-protection, it became clear to me that I no longer had the right as a parent to be complacent with my own safety and my own life. Because by jeopardizing my own, by not taking responsibility for it, I was actually endangering the future of my children. Because without me, they have no mother. So that is my responsibility. When you have more people in your care, your responsibility, the level of that responsibility grows. I also get met with an interesting mix of people, and this really does reflect the conversation coming back to the church shooting. After what happened in Sandy Hook, I was met with applause by a certain community, and I was also met with some really heavy resistance from even close friends and extended family who felt that the fact that I had a gun in my life, in my home, around children, made me a subpar parent and meant that I was perpetuating a culture of violence. And that came out of the blue for me. I was not prepared for that kind of response. And it made me really think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more solidified I became in my commitment to utilizing these pieces of equipment and tools and rounding out my skill set to make sure that I was the best prepared with them, the most responsible that I could be with them if I ever had to use them. And those conversations continued. They came, a couple of family members, there was a fairly good conversation and debate. And at the end of it, a number of them resigned themselves to the fact that they were sheeple, that they fully expected that if the zombie apocalypse happened, that they would be zombie bait fairly quickly. Like, okay, all right, if you can find peace with that, then that's all we can ask. But that if they were at the mall, for example, and someone were to come into the main mall and open fire, that they would really wish that I was there with them. So on the one hand, they didn't want me to have the ability to have a firearm, but if their lives were in danger, and I was there and I wasn't carrying, that they would harbor some resentment towards me for not having the tools to save their lives when I knew how. So it's a very interesting combination, and it comes back to this church conversation, because in New England in colonial times, it wasn't a matter of personal lifestyle choice to carry a firearm with you into your place of worship. It was a requirement by law to bring a weapon with you to church, because you were a colonist and you were not really welcomed by the local population. Therefore, if you went to church unarmed, well, it was a pretty great place for the neighboring tribes, local tribes, to take out the problem of the colonists, because, hey, they're all in this white building in this same place. They've got nobody there and they're just going to close the door and wipe them all out. So it became a requirement by law. You were required, if you were an able-bodied person, man, to own a weapon, to bring it with you wherever you went. And there were audits where the knock on the door came and it wasn't to register your gun, but to make sure you had it. You weren't allowed to lend it, transfer it, allow someone else to borrow it, and you had to keep it in good condition. So we've kind of gone from a country where firearms were part of the fabric of our culture. And it's eroded over time in different parts of the country since the rural and urban shifts have really started pulling our sensibilities apart. And now the church, rather than being a sanctuary for the soul, it's become a sanctuary from violence, and it excludes firearms, where at one time in our nation's culture, it was a requirement that they were there. So it's a wild dichotomy, and it's the same thing with the concealed carrier. It's the same conversation about guns in school, and here we see it in pretty stark reality with this church example. And I think more than the school shootings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can all kind of unify around a place of worship regardless of what denomination it is, and we can all relate to that because it is supposed to be a place of sanctuary.
Yeah. I want to expand that just a little bit. Going beyond one solitary madman in South Carolina, there are a lot of extremist Muslims that claim they've got almost 100 sleeper cells in the United States that are ready to go to war with us. If they were to do terrorist attacks, where do you think they are going after Christians in the Middle East right now. If you're a Christian, you live in the Middle East, you're a target. Do you think they might be expanding to maybe look at, if they're looking for targets in the United States, maybe looking for something like a church here? That's kind of where I still think you should, especially if you're going to a Christian church, you are, I don't care where in the world you are, right now you're a target. And I guess and to finish off my thought here, I carry absolutely everywhere I go. I will not go anywhere that I cannot carry. The only exception being to if I have to go into the police station here, which I will have to in a few years to renew my concealed carry permit, or if I go to court. Those are the two places that are not allowed that I won't go. Other than that, I've made the choice. If I can't carry, I won't go. But I would encourage our listeners, if you cannot protect yourself, get into a position where you can. Unfortunately, I've been fighting saying this for a long time. If you live in New Jersey and you cannot protect yourself, folks, it's time to go. So the only one we haven't heard from yet is Dr. Edeen. John, what do you think?
Well, I think this is a question of good versus evil. And the shooter in South Carolina personified evil. You guys know that my thing is actually getting rid of gun-free zones in hospitals, and I've been fighting that. This event demonstrates the futility of laws and signs and things that say no guns allowed here, because evil does not respect laws and signs. In fact, in my book, this is really a moral issue, in that it's immoral to keep these gun-free zones in place. We know that this is where even this guy, picked this particular church because it was a gun-free zone. He had actually been planning on shooting up a university, and according to one of his friends that he talked to, and he changed his mind because the university had security and the church didn't. So he was able to shoot a lot of people. And frankly, I think we need to hold the legislators accountable. Every time that they fail to get rid of gun-free zones, we need to hold their feet to the fire, because it's really a moral issue at this point.
Yeah. Very much so. Well, we are late for break. We're going to go ahead and step off to break. I don't think we're done talking about this yet, though. So hang on, everybody. We'll be right back right after this. Do we want to continue talking about this? Do we want to jump off to something else?
We could mention how the mayor of Charleston said that there's too many guns, and my response is that there was one too few.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we all, echo that same sentiment.
And also, we need to mention that the pastor was a senator, right? South Carolina senator, and was anti-gun. So this person probably would not have let guns in his church anyway.
Sounds like we have some topics to cover.
Yeah.
And why don't we, Rob? Why don't we go ahead and because the next story just dovetails. That's the Hillary Clinton story. And it's kind of still on topic. So why don't we go ahead and lead with that, and then we'll come back in and cover everything else.
So lead with Clinton, and then have the comments jump in?
Yeah, exactly. Does that sound, or should we come in with just continuing the discussion and then get into the, what do you think?
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
Let me page down to that. Okay, ready?
Yep.
What page is that?
Say
Sorry?
again?
What page?
After it says break, and it says, of course she did.
I think page 6. Pretty sure.
Does this thing have pages?
Yeah, mine just scrolls down.
Okay. Mine doesn't have pages either. Rob, I think you got the special edition.
Yeah, I've got the big print special. Don't make fun of the handicapped.
And we are rolling.
Welcome back to the news segment of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Firearms Policy Coalition. In a related news story, front-running Democrat president candidate Hillary Clinton lost little time before she called for new restrictions on firearms. This occurred in the wake of the tragedy at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. As predicted, it was the standard anti-gun litany of common sense reforms. It included universal background checks, keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers or people suffering from mental illness, or even people on the terror watch list. Someone should tell Mrs. Clinton that none of her wish list would have kept the gun out of the murderer's hands. He apparently passed the background checks that she's so fond of.
She came out in support of gun control. In other news, water is wet. This is something we very much expect from Mrs. Clinton.
George, you were saying something during the break.
Yeah, I mentioned the fact that the mayor of Charleston, one of his immediate responses was that there was just too many guns. Well, I think all of us here would agree that there was one gun too few. But we also mentioned that the pastor himself was anti-gun. So what I said before about seeking permission from your pastor to carry in church still wouldn't have applied there. It would still have been an anti-gun zone. And those people were unfortunately completely helpless. And that's just a sad state of affairs. Other people telling you have to give up your right of self-defense to go into that building. I prefer to play it safe and not go into places where I am told I cannot carry my gun into. I just won't go into them. And
yeah, some of us don't have that luxury. Unfortunately, I have to go into a hospital which is a gun-free zone, and it's legislated so by the state of Texas. And it's a Class A misdemeanor for me to carry a gun. And also, since I'm in San Antonio, later on we'll find out about knives, too. You can't even carry a knife. So, you know, it's nice to have the choice, but if you don't have the choice because your livelihood depends on it, you're stuck dealing with what you're left with.
Mm-hmm.
George, you and Hillary bring up something pretty important. She's all for gun control. Well, this guy only had, probably 7-round mags, given that I think he was shooting an old 45.
It was a
Evidently, capacity restrictions don't make much difference, do they?
Well, no, they don't. In cases where capacity restrictions are applied, usually what happens is people go up in caliber. When the assault weapons ban, Clinton's assault weapons ban, when that happened, 9mm dropped in popularity and people started buying a lot more 45s. And if it happens again, people will go up. I mean, because of that, I mean, we saw the rise of the 480 Ruger, the 500 Smith & Wesson. So, yeah, if you limit my number of rounds, I'm just going to get bigger rounds. It's not going to help anything. And, of course, you can always just, like this guy did, reload. Now, he was armed with a 45 caliber Glock, and a lot of the photos that we've seen released by the press, it was a Glock handgun, probably a model 21. So he had a good capacity, and he took the time to reload several times. And there was opportunity that somebody could have stopped him if they were
armed,
capable. Just like the Fort Hood shooter. Look at this. At Fort Hood, you had a room full of warriors, people trained to defend their nation, and they were, by fiat, not allowed to defend themselves. They were unarmed. So I'm not going to mention his name. We're going to take the Lord Voldemort approach and call him he who should not be named or must not be named. And he went and was able to take his time to shoot everybody he wanted until somebody, a good guy with a gun, showed up to stop him.
There's another facet to this that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, and it's the primetime Hollywood perception of what it means to be a concealed carrier. And this is the perception of people who are not members of the firearms community and aren't aware of the fact that the majority and a growing number of individuals who carry concealed on a regular basis don't just carry a gun. We carry flashlights, we carry tools that will allow us to prevent and evade an attack so it doesn't happen. We carry with us a level of situational awareness that is intrinsic to carrying concealed. It is a part of the concealed carry lifestyle. We're that much more alert. We also carry med kits. We're prepared for what happens before, during, and after that deadly force encounter. So if you look at Aurora, Colorado, for example, and the movie theater shooting, if there was somebody in there with a tourniquet, which many of us who carry concealed carry med kits with us. I always have a med kit on me. If I've got a bigger purse, I've got a bigger med kit in it. If I've got a tiny clutch, I've got a mini med kit in it. It is as important to me as that gun is. And I don't think enough people appreciate the fact that a concealed carrier, and again, this is a growing trend more than just the retail investment of buying a gun and holster and a belt, but we have the training to deal with the whole situation. We can keep people alive through the encounter, and we can keep them alive until first responders arrive on scene. We are there to be prepared, and that means that we offer that back, whether it's our own life we're saving or somebody else's, even if we never draw our guns.
That's a very good point, Tatiana. I just want to point out one thing, what you said before. There's a huge effort of the anti-gunners to stereotype people, to pigeonhole them, label them, box them in, so that they can be basically dismissed. But take a look at yourself. You do not look like the typical, stereotypical gun owner. You're a beautiful woman. You sound articulate. You sound educated. And you are not the face of the gun owner. I mean, look at the panel we've got here. We've got I didn't read your bio, but you're a mother. We've got a surgeon. We've got a truck driver. We've got a marketing director.
Yeah, Rob's an engineer.
An engineer, yes.
Rachel's a professional musician.
Right.
My background is in fine art.
Yes. So we've got this wide spectrum that you can't fit that into a box. We've got men, we've got women, we've got racial minorities. The gun community is America, and I would like to say it is the exceptional side of America. It's not a white America. It's not a black, conservative, liberal. It's the exceptional America. It's what America. It's what makes America great. And when somebody tries to pigeonhole you, you can say, oh, "I'm sorry, no, stop right there. We're not going to allow those stereotypes to continue." Just my 2 cents.
Sure.
Yeah, we're the good guys. We're not the bad guys. We're your neighbor. We're your friends. We're the person that's standing next to you in line in the supermarket. We're everywhere in places where it's legally allowed. We're we're part of the population. We're the top 2%ers or whatever. As far as the good people, we're not the bad guys.
When it comes to being responsible, I think we are in the top couple percent.
Yeah, I mean we go for training so we can learn the art and science of defending ourselves.
More so than law enforcement. Law enforcement don't get to attend firearms training very often. They're lucky to get some qualification rounds every year.
And we pay our own money to do it.
That's the truth.
We're not getting taxpayer money to go out and get training. It comes out of our own pockets. We save. We save up ammunition. We buy airline tickets if we have to go somewhere for training. And the cost of training isn't necessarily cheap either. Plus, you have to equip yourself. So it's an investment in not only ourselves but our families and our communities.
Is there anything else you want to cover about this topic, about the South Carolina issue?
Well, this next news story dovetails with it, Paul.
Okay.
A firearms instructor wanted to be more than a good witness. He wanted to prevent a crime before it happened. The owner of Bear Bean Firearms in Tulsa, Oklahoma, offers free training classes to preachers and ministers. Charles Peters said, and I quote, "Protecting their flock is important. Being prepared for that unfortunate event when it happens needs to take place prior to it happening, not reacting to it afterwards. I've offered these classes before and nobody showed up because nobody thinks it affects them. This recent event will cause them to see how much it can affect them." Close quote. Peters said he's already received calls from pastors interested in his free course, and some have signed up. He cautions anyone who seeks out a concealed carry permit that they also need to receive proper safety training. Pastors will only need to show identification, showing that they're a pastor or assistant pastor. They'll still need to pay any state fees associated with the permit.
That's great news. It reminds you of a story. Oh goodness, it's been a couple years ago that there was a trainer. I believe she was in Eastern Washington that was offering free training to ladies who had restraining orders. All you had to do was contact her, and you had to actually have a restraining order. But she was offering free training to those ladies. I think it's either way. It's both instances are trainers doing fantastic things for their community.
I've reached out to some pastors I know, and I asked them a kind of a philosophical question. Why do so many religious leaders think it's noble to be disarmed victims? I think that topic, we're going to see it passed around quite a bit.
And
that's a good question. We see in the very popular series Walking Dead, the pastor character. Sorry, my tongue's dyslexic. This guy, he had his flock, and when it came right down to it, he wasn't able to defend them and locked them out. And very tragic story, very tragic character. And it's interesting how he's going to turn out. But he thinks that he is on the moral high ground for being completely defenseless. And that's just not the case. When Jesus himself kicked the moneylenders out of the temple, he did it with a whip in his hand. He flipped tables. He took care of business and did what he had to do to cleanse the temple.
So grabbing a whip and throwing furniture around is part of what would Jesus do?
Yes, that's not completely out of the question. Now, once he does, kick them out and scold them and take care of that business, of course, forgive them. But then he can turn the other cheek. But he took care of business hands-on and directly.
Right, and an attitude of forgiveness doesn't mean that you sit there and let somebody get killed. It means that you're not defending yourself, you're not defending an innocent life out of vengeance, out of spite, out of hate, but out of love.
Exactly.
There are many passages in the Bible that speak to this. And on Carl Chin's site, he quotes one, "We prayed to our God and posted a guard," Nehemiah 4:9. And I think that's a very good example and one to highlight that says, you know what, yes, we do have these truths that we hold dear to our hearts, and we do believe that God will provide and God will protect us, but he has also given us the means and the will and the rationality to do what we need to through his grace and strength to take care of ourselves here. And so to deny those, and Rachel, you spoke to this a bit too earlier, is to kind of a slap in the face to the creator. I gave you the means, I gave you the ability, I gave you the intelligence, and yet you did nothing with it.
I think this is a good point then to step off to break again. We're coming up on break. I want to go ahead and we're going to throw our gun quota here into this point, and I'm going to go ahead and take it today. And this is one that we picked up basically off of Facebook. And you cannot argue with the logic of this one. If they think gun buybacks get guns away from criminals, then why don't they ever do crack and heroin buybacks? So hang on, everybody. We'll be right back right after this.
Well, they couldn't do that in D.C. because the mayor would be using it all.
Hey, you probably just gave somebody a good idea.
What I'd like to do, guys, we got a bunch of stories, but we got interviews coming up. What I'm thinking is this, Rob, Rachel, if we can hang out a little while, and we'll do John and George and Tatiana, if you want to. What I'm going to do is at the very end of the show, we'll come back and do the rest of the stories, and we're going to put this on. We're doing 2 shows this week because we've got more interviews than we can fit into one show. We'll do an interview. We'll do a news segment, and we'll stick that in with that midweek show, and we'll start with the next story that we've got in line, and we'll just record a fast news segment with everything else we got left. Does that sound all right?
Cool.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for the duration.
Okay.
I've got about another 30 minutes.
All right. Let's get into the DGUs then, and then we can and at that point we'll be getting towards interviews, and anybody that wants to bail, we can release without any inconsistencies in the show. So. Rachel, you want to do DGUs?
Sure thing. You ready?
Yep, and rolling.
Hi, welcome back to the Polite Society podcast powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. This is our defensive gun use segment. 3 men approached a resident of Hope Mills, North Carolina as he arrived home after midnight. The 3 thieves drew their firearms and demanded money. The resident reached back into his car and drew his revolver. He shot one of the thieves, and all 3 of the thieves then ran off on foot. The victim was shot in the abdomen, taken to Cape Fear Medical Center, and is expected to recover. Police found one of the thieves wearing latex gloves and with a gunshot wound to his chest. The thief died before medical help arrived.
George, we had just talked about capacity restrictions, and I guess a revolver is a classic example of capacity restrictions. If you had 3 armed guys charging you, and you're sitting there with a revolver, that takes some courage. 6 shots suddenly doesn't feel like enough.
If there are 6 shots in that revolver, it could have been a 5 shot.
Could have been a 5. Yow!
Well, that's why I carry 2 of them.
The New York reload, right?
Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of that. We saw that in a tactical training class that I put on. We had Larry Correia, New York bestseller, Larry Correia, author, and we had Mike Kupari, the co-author of the Dead Six series, and he was at one of my tactical handgun classes, and we didn't know he had a backup revolver. And part of the shooting string, the drill, was to engage multiple targets. So he ran it. The first time he ran it, did the reload like everybody has to do a reload in the middle of the string, and then complete the string. But the second time Mike Kapari ran it, he pulled out his little J-frame backup gun and finished the string without hesitation and without even breaking his shooting cadence. It was amazing. Everybody in the class just started applauding. That was the best reload ever. So, a lot of fun.
Was he shooting weak-handed, or did he drop his primary arm?
Well, he is left-handed, so he's weak-handed from the start. But he did draw his backup revolver with his right hand the correct hand, and then he finished the string like that. But,
was he pocket carrying or appendix carrying?
It was pocket carry. He was wearing some like tactical pants. There's plenty of room, so he just reached in his pocket, grabbed it, and it was absolutely fun. But the thing about carrying a revolver for defense, and you know, when you take the class from Grant Cunningham, you're going to realize you're really not really behind an 8-ball, because revolvers do have a set of advantages that an automatic doesn't have. So this amount of power, just natural inherent accuracy, and just an ease of being able to apply that accuracy and that great force of violence to that target right where you want. It's a fantastic weapon system.
Sounds like we had some cool discussion on that one. Here's the next DGU. An Atlanta homeowner was forced to overpower an attacker and then shoot him several times in defense of his life. 2 men busted through his door at 3 a.m. The wounded burglar was taken to the hospital, where he died several hours later. Police are still looking for the other home invader.
Paul, you've talked about sleep inertia.
Mm-hmm.
And what do they call it? Not confirmation bias. That if you can break in with one sound of broken glass, you're probably all right. It's the second one that people are finally woken up enough to actually hear. Boy, at 3 a.m., everybody's behind the 8-ball.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A sleep inertia I've been specifically as a truck driver trained in, because we're on timelines and we sleep in the truck. It takes the normal person under normal circumstances 15 minutes from the time they first wake up until they've gained enough of their faculties to safely drive any vehicle, let alone a commercial vehicle. And now there are two things that are going to affect this. You're going to go into an adrenaline dump if you are in an emergency situation. That's not going to kill the sleep inertia. What it is going to do is kill your fine motor skills. And so not only do you have an issue where your fine motor, you're wondering what the hell's going on, because your sleep inertia is still, you may not even, depending on how long you've been up, were up before and how shortly you've been asleep, you may not still know precisely where you're at, but now you've got this adrenaline dump kicking in where your fine motor skills are going away too. It's something that takes a lot of training. There is no cure for sleep inertia. There is, other than time. It's just something you got to work around.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why I don't really care how good my best is. I care how good my worst is, and I want to train so I'm making my worst good enough.
And you have to train in the context of what you're actually preparing for. We spend so much time on the range in this beautiful, perfect, we're lined up square and lovely to the targets. Have you tried jumping out of bed, finding your gun in the dark, and maneuvering safely through your house in the dark? Have you tried that? Obviously, blue guns are fantastic for this, but have you actually tried setting a timer or a alarm that you're not familiar with, not your normal alarm, on your cell phone? Have you tried waking up, have somebody else pick a time and just do it? I know when my kids are home, they can sneeze in the next room. They can drop a pillow off their bed in the next room, and I am up and in there checking on them. If they're not home, I could sleep through a hurricane. The world could be ending outside, and I would be in deep REM sleep, and it wouldn't matter. But it's interesting. It's almost a subconscious awareness of your environment in your home. And what are you actually training for? The range is fantastic. How quickly can you respond to the timer? That's great, but it's a choreographed activity. There are known variables. You have time to think about it. You know it's coming. There's nothing unexpected. If you really want to train to use your equipment in the context of your home, you need to invest in the type of training that's going to give you the skills to actually do it, not just theoretically do it, but get comfortable at the range and then sign up for a force-on-force shoot house close quarters battle, ECQC, extreme close quarters battle, hand to hand, where it gets ugly. And until you've experienced that, it's all just a nice idea.
Very well said. The police sometimes tell us to be a good witness, and that can sound like good advice, but could you watch and do nothing while a friend of yours was being robbed at gunpoint? A thief walked into a bread box convenience store in Knoxville, Tennessee. He pointed a 9mm pistol at the clerk and forced her behind the counter. The thief did not see the clerk's friend waiting in the parking lot. The clerk's friend grabbed his own handgun and entered the store, and that is when he shot the thief and saved the clerk. The thief died. Police called the shooting justified because of the threat to the clerk's life. They also reported that the thief's gun had the serial numbers filed off, and the police are still trying to trace where the gun was stolen. Family members of the thief said the friend in the car shouldn't have gotten involved.
Well, yeah.
No, that's family members of the thief, not of the victim.
Yeah. That's almost to be expected anymore. It's kind of a precursor to we're going to sue your pants off. I don't know the Tennessee law, but I know there are several states that have laws that if you're acting in defense of life, that you cannot be sued in the case where you have to use your gun in self-defense or defense of others. I don't know Tennessee law. I'm certainly not an attorney, but I certainly hope that applies in this case.
We have one DGU left today. This is where two thugs got between a mama bear and her cub, but did live to regret it, just barely. A Nashville woman opened her front door to two men who said they were the police. The masked men blew in, grabbed the homeowner, and demanded her money. When she was unable to give them what they wanted, they began to beat her. With her daughter looking on, she resisted and fought back. The fight rolled out onto the front lawn where she was able to grab a thug's gun and turn it on the cowardly duo. Several shots chased them down the street. Neither suspect is known to have been hit. The woman was taken to the hospital with cuts and bruises. Her daughter was unharmed. Police have been unable to find the hapless thugs and have not said if the woman would be charged for firing at the fleeing invaders or if she will be allowed to keep the gun. We say, she's earned it.
Amen. This is another. The reason I really wanted this story in the show today. This is another example of one of the things you hear is you don't want to be a gun owner because they're just going to take your gun away from you and use it against you. Well, here's a victim that wasn't armed to start with, but she was able to fight back and get one of the bad guys' guns. And honestly, I hear a lot more of these stories than I do of a bad guy taking a good person's gun away.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty amazing. A woman who is statistically more vulnerable and less strong than a man against two men. And I bet you anything that having her daughter there and knowing that her daughter was in danger gave her amazing strength to fight.
Hell hath no fury, like a mother defending her child. It doesn't get more primal than that.
Amen. Well, we are going to go ahead and... was there anything else?
I was figuring Tatiana would go for it. I'm glad she did.
I'm going to go ahead and step off to break then. When we come back, we've got our show close and email segment to come up, and we'll get to that right after this. Okay. I have invited Carl into the hangout, but I have not. He's the one that's up in? We're supposed to get to him. What, a minute ago?
Yeah, I'm going to see if I've got him on my.
And let me pod Susan up. She's back.
Oh, I don't see him here. Let me email him again.
Okay. And I was right on my time, right? He's supposed to be in at 2:45 Pacific, 4:45 Central.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see if I've got a different email for him that I put it up here. Nope, there it is.
So how'd the meeting go?
Meeting went fine.
Okay.
They John's gonna stay for a month or so. Robert will be staying until he gets a formal job offer from somewhere else. Other than that, they're basically looking for home deli staff.
Yeah. Well, brought it on themselves.
Four out of the 6 have already turned in their notices.
By the way, what does your management review look like this year?
Do we want to go ahead and do the show close while we're waiting? And
Sure. Yeah.
I think we have to edit it a little bit. What's that? By the way, who just crashed through the wall? Who's doing that?
it's Tatiana's coming. It's coming from her feed.
Sorry.
That's okay.
What is it?
Sorry, it's my notebook that covered the mic. Won't happen to me.
It was fascinating.
Sound
Aliens are taking over Maine, according to what we just heard.
effect. The residents would agree.
Oh, good point.
Totally would. It's tourist season, so they're all here.
By the way, I brought up your comments before about could we please spread the gun culture so that you can come out of the closet and not feel like a three-headed alien in Maine?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Okay. So where do you want to take it from, Paul?
Let's just do the show close.
Do you want to throw in the parse part?
Yeah, I'll throw that in as we come in.
Okay.
And we got one comment on the website that is we didn't get any email other than that one comment on the website, and I'd want to discuss that. So, all right, and I'll bring us in coming in at 5. And welcome back to the Polite Society Podcast. This is the email and blog post segment. Before we get to that, I forgot at the end of DGUs to mention that we do post each of our news and DGU segments up at politesocietypodcast.com. The stories are linked. The DGU stories are linked. Or if you want to, you can share the entire segment, just that segment, with a friend so they don't have to wrap up the whole show if they're only interested in 1 or 2 stories. So go ahead and go to politesocietypodcast.com and you can check all that out. Listener email, well, we didn't get any, but we did get a comment on the website that I did want to talk about. We had a listener comment and said that he was having a little bit of issue with our show, that the commercials were a little bit louder than the rest of the show, and he had to reach down and turn down his volume. I do apologize for that. It's an ongoing issue that I think I did some work on it today. I did a couple, 3 hours, honestly, work on it today. I think everything will come out now nice and even, and you should be able to leave your volume set at one specific level and not have to touch it. I don't have that issue myself. I don't listen through headsets. I listen on my stereo in the truck. I don't, when I'm done editing, yes, I listen to the whole show beginning to end, but I listen to the stereo in the truck as I'm driving down the road, and it never really affected me, but I don't have the earbuds right in my ear as I'm listening. So that's...
And if the issue is not fixed, email me, Susan, at politicsandguns.com, and I'll write him until he does fix it right.
There you go. So that's listener email. Rob, do you have any new posts from Slowfax you want to talk about this week?
I wrote about the murders at the Charleston Church and the political protests in New Jersey following the murder of Carol Bown. We've had Amber Cuno on the show before. Amber wrote a powerful piece about the murder of Carol Bown, and I linked to it. I was surprised by the response. 10,000 people came by my site to read those comments. I want to thank our listeners for sharing these articles, since most of my viewers came from Facebook. The articles are also posted at Amoland and Clash Daily, as well as on my blog, slowfax.wordpress.com. Tatiana, how about you?
Available online via American Shooting Journal are two recent articles that I wrote, one specifically speaking to merging real-world training with your range time practice, and another one about the differences, scientifically speaking, about how men and women learn and process information when they have a gun in their hands. These are available again through American Shooting Journal. They received great feedback and answered a lot of the questions and addressed some of the concerns that I've been getting from a lot of new shooters, both male and female. I'm also honored to be writing for Be Ready magazine, so look for articles from me regarding women's concealed carry and big picture training in their biannual publications. And for more information about my own personal training schedule and the types of information and courses that I offer, you're welcome to follow me online at TatianaWhitlock.com.
Oh, John, have you got anything you want to talk about that you've written up lately?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a couple articles. One called "The Unthinkable: An Active Shooter in a Hospital," and the other one was "A Tale of Two Shootings." Both can be accessed through drgo.us. Also, you could probably find me at an Appleseed shoot trying to get my rifleman patch too, at some point in time.
You know, I know a co-host that lives down in the Austin area that might be able to help you with that.
I've already had that pleasure.
All right. You know, I want to real briefly. I want to mention that I am easily the how do I put this? I am the least intelligent person on the show, and I am absolutely honored that I have this amount of talent and writing ability and knowledge around me. And I have got to say that the thank you for the new people who are just coming in to step in and do some step in co-hosting, and for my regulars, guys, come on, this is it's an honor for me just to be associated with you folks. So. I do need to throw out one more shout out again. Charlie Foxtrot. He does the Not One More Gun Law blog. Just go ahead and Google him up. He and Archer do a great job with that blog. He wrote about the shooting as well in South Carolina. And please go check out his blog. He writes up our news and our DGU segments for us. And that does wrap up another episode of the Polite Society podcast. I'd like to thank Carl Chin, Dan Roberts for joining us today. We're going to have a midweek show. We've already got Ken Blanchard from Black Man with a Gun, and we've got Gary Slider of handgunlaw.us. We've got those interviews done, but they're not going to fit into today's show. So we're going to have a news segment, and we're going to have those two interviews coming out on a midweek show. That'll be episode 335. Look for that Wednesday morning. That kind of does wrap up this episode. We're going to be having, so Doug Ritter of Knife Rights is looking to join us next week. So, Rob, are you going to be around next week?
Plan to be.
Rachel, how about you? You going to be here?
Not next week. I'll be on the range, but the following week I should be back.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm hoping that Gary and John will be back. And that'll wrap up this show, everybody. Until next time.
Stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll be seeing you down the road.
Okay, that was short. I still don't see Carl Chin.
I emailed him. Do I have his phone number? I tried. Oh, 2 new messages. Let me check something else.
If he does bomb, I can edit that. I mean, I can edit him out of the show at this point. It's not a big deal.
I don't. Yeah, he's not getting back to. Do I have? Oh, let me check Skype if I got him by phone last time. I'm pretty sure we saw him.
Yeah, if you need me to, I got Skype up because it's on my secondary laptop here that Susan donated. I'm going to. I can just call him.
He's got the faint green circle, not the bright green, so his computer's on. I'd say let's go and do the next news segment, and if he shows, he shows. We got to do it anyway.
Okay.
Or do you want to call Dan?
Tatiana left. Okay.
Yep, she had to go.
All right. It's up to you. Well, what do you? Let's try. Let's get that second interview in.
With Dan Roberts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go back up to scroll up to get his number.
Yeah. By the way, when you post the notes, don't put that in there.
Oh yeah, no, that won't be an issue. Okay, let me see if I can find it here. I got to remember this does go over YouTube, so I got to keep my mouth shut.
So Rachel, next week is the women's shoot at Battle Road?
Yeah, all weekend. We got 30 ladies signed up, and probably some more will this week, so it's going to be great.
Now, what kind of training is it again?
This is a rifle, just a rifle marksmanship course. Nothing tactical, nothing fast, just how to use a rifle correctly and accurately.
So what, a combination of first shots and Appleseed without the history?
We do Texas history. We call it the
Oh,
Ghost
you
of Goliath
do?
course. Yeah. So we do Texas history. We do all the shooting positions. We actually take them out to at least to 400 yards the second day if their shot groups are tight enough. For the rest of them, we'll usually keep them on rimfire at the 25-yard range, or we'll do a long distance qualification just going out to 100 yards with rimfire, which is super cool.
Cool.
So, yep.
All right, I'm gonna ring him up here.
Okay.
I think I'm doing that shoot in July. With the
Good.
men.
Okay. At Battle Road?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
So, if you're there, hopefully I'll see you.
Yes.
And by the way, Rachel can get into all those positions. Trust me, I've seen her do it.
Yeah, and a few other that you're not supposed to get into.
Some of those contorted positions that my body doesn't do.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul Lathrop, Polite Society Podcast. The whole crew is here.
Okay.
All right, let me.
Now, Dan, you're being podcast onto a YouTube Hangout.
Okay.
So that's live. We'll edit it for the show, but this is going on YouTube just so that you know other people can hear what you say.
Okay, no problem.
Well, good for you to know.
All right.
Well, I'm kind of famous for not having much of a filter, so.
Hopefully you'll have just a little bit more of one than if I hadn't mentioned that.
Please, the only thing I ask is mind George Carlin's 7 words. Other than that, feel free.
Absolutely, not a problem.
All right. You ready, Rob? I'm gonna have you intro this.
Let me get down to interviews. Dan Robert. Yes, I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, we're rolling.
Welcome to another interview segment of the Polite Society Podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. For a second week in a row, we're lucky to have Dan Roberts with us. Dan's talking about the ongoing protests and political news from New Jersey. Dan, what's been happening this week?
There's been a lot that has gone on in the last week, the last talk to you guys. Late last Tuesday evening, around 11:30 at night, word got out that Senate President Steve Sweeney had used his puppets, his Democratic puppets on his local hometown council to add a last-minute ordinance to their agenda for Wednesday to basically custom tailor a no protesting town ordinance to stop the protesters from coming in front of his house. It's something that we've been derisively referring to as the Protect Steve Sweeney Act. It's a blatant violation of the First Amendment. There's talk the ACLU is already getting involved or will get involved in the near future. And if you read the proposed language, it is absolutely outrageous. And like I said, it was essentially written for him by 3 Democratic town council members that are in his back pocket.
I did read that thing, and the whole thing. You're allowed, I think, protest once every 2 weeks, but you've got to give 1 week's notice. And there can be, Susan, help me out there. How many? They were allowed 4 protesters. Was that it?
10 protesters, I think.
10.
10.
Yeah.
And you have to be within. You can't be within 100 feet of the person's house.
Actually, it's 100 feet of the property line.
On the property line. Okay, so you have to be in the park next door to protest. In other words.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
No, that would be fascinating. I can imagine there are a number of people who will say, you know what, I'm going to break this law. You arrest me. Now we'll go to town.
What has to happen is, it's not in effect yet. What has to happen is it has a first reading, which was what happened on Wednesday night. Then there's a second reading that's required. That'll happen at the next meeting of the council next month. Then if it's passed and enacted, then there's a 30-day period before it can officially become law. So even at this point, the protesters could be out there till beginning of August with no repercussions whatsoever.
And now something important happens next weekend, doesn't it?
Yeah, next Saturday is the official kickoff of the signature gathering drive to recall Senator Sweeney. That's where everybody will get together. Tim Knight, that was successful with the recalls in Colorado, is coming in, and we're gathering. I think we're at just under 500 people to show up to go out into Legislative District 3 and start collecting petitions and signatures to recall Senator Sweeney.
How has the media been handling this? Because remind our listeners why this entire issue came up.
Well, the media, they were, how do I put this? The editorial board of the paper that's literally in his backyard wrote a pretty scathing critique of the protest. I wrote a rebuttal that I was very surprised they actually printed, calling them out on their blatant double standards. They were talking about things like, it was in poor taste to use Carol Bone's murder for political points, and I rebutted them with, well, you guys weren't criticizing Sweeney when he was parading imported Sandy Hook family members before the cameras. And I made a couple of other points, and to their credit, they did print it, which was very surprising. They have another op-ed out today criticizing the West Deptford Town Council for this proposed ordinance, but in the critique, they still are using derisive language. It's things like, the protesters have worn out their welcome, and it's crass and insensitive, and still kind of trying to defend Sweeney and his actions.
We have we have a New Jersey citizen murdered on her driveway that the state made defenseless, and a journalist thinks it's crass and insensitive to hold politicians accountable. That's what we deal with quite a bit.
Sweeney's also playing the victim card. He has a special needs teenage daughter. He claims in the media that she was frightened, scared, very upset, things of that nature. I have spoken to people that were there last Sunday and saw her come out of the house with her parents and go to his SUV, and said, no, she looked a little wide-eyed, but, nothing, no red face, no tears, no trembling, nothing that would indicate that this was a child that was terrified or scared or intimidated. So now he's playing the victim card as well.
Anything else in the news media? Did you get any further information on the delay in getting Carol Bound her firearms purchase card?
Yes, actually, I'm working on an article for my ammoland.com column right now about that to bring people up to date on what I've discovered. I had a conversation with the staff member at the county clerk's adjuster's office on Friday, and that was around how long does it take for them to process the mental health records search. And I was told that typically takes 2 to 3 days, no longer than 1 week, and that's only in situations where they would have to physically go root through paper files that haven't been scanned and electronically uploaded yet. So the narrative of the local chief of police is falling apart as more and more facts are uncovered. At this point, I think a very valid argument could be made for the Berlin Police Department is guilty of gross negligence, misconduct. I spoke with Carol's sister yesterday, and I should be meeting with her sister and her brother at some point this week for an extensive interview. I did not know until they told me this, that Carol's killer, according to the family, had an active warrant for his arrest, and various family members would see him in and around town at, a convenience store or another location, and they would immediately call the police and say, hey, look, this is where he is right now, and no one ever came to make the arrest.
Wow.
I've also been told by Carol's sister that Carol kept extensive notes and documents that she's going to give me access to, and police reports, which has me very curious, because when I asked the spokesperson for the Camden County Prosecutor's Office if he could comment if there was a history of Carol calling the authorities or reporting to the authorities that, this guy was vandalizing her property, her car, stalking her, whatever the case may be, the response I got was no comment. There is an active, full-blown, ongoing cover-up going on right now.
Dan, I wish I was surprised. I'm not. You and I have long suspected and looked for proof that New Jersey law enforcement deliberately delays issuing permits to stifle the ability of citizens to own firearms. It looks like we have the evidence. The question is, do we have... What? What I wonder is, do we have citizens who have the political will to change things?
Well, I mean, the Recall Sweeney campaign certainly got a boost in the arm as a result of this case. And if I can briefly backtrack to Senator Sweeney's actions last Sunday, he's so petty that he took to turning on his irrigation system and hosing down the protesters who were on a public sidewalk in an attempt to drive them off. And the funny thing about it is, that day, last Sunday, it was 95 degrees and 98% humidity. So really all he wound up doing was providing a source of refreshment.
Have other groups gotten in contact with you?
With me? No.
Well, or that you know of have gotten involved with this? Domestic violence groups, other gun groups in New Jersey? Where are all the gun ranges? Where are all the gun clubs?
Unfortunately, it's kind of a mixed bag, because there's a certain fraction of gun shops and gun owners that are perfectly okay with the status quo, or are afraid, and this is a direct quote from one owner, they don't want to piss Sweeney off, or they don't want to see him recalled, because then the prospective replacement, Loretta Weinberg or Lou Greenwald or one of the other, top 5 Democrats in the legislature will be worse. So there is even some resistance from within the community, which is very disappointing. It is incredibly disappointing.
I would say that if he were to be recalled, that Weinberg or whoever else would get into the leadership role, the presidency of the Senate, that would bring them in tow. That would bring them to heel, so to speak, much more than it would make their replacement worse.
That is the argument that those of us on the recall side have been making to everyone, is that if this is successful, and not to use a bad cliche or a bad pun, but that is a huge shot across the bow to people like Loretta Weinberg and Lou Greenwald and Linda Greenstein and others. And that finally gets their attention to where they say, these people are serious. They're not playing games anymore. There's a whole bunch of potential reasons for why all of this kind of backdoor Machiavellian type of stuff is going on. Whatever. But there are some divisions amongst shops and gun owners in the state. Unfortunately, as has been pointed out lots of times, New Jersey does not really have a very robust gun culture, particularly from the Trenton Point up to the northeast corner, where it's very urbanized. Down where I am, outside of near Rowan University and outside of Philadelphia, it's still a very rural area, and it's much more gun owner friendly. My daughter attends the same elementary school I went to 40 years ago, and they are very supportive of her competitive shooting career. They've never given her a hard time about her wearing a gun-themed T-shirt to school or even her jersey to school. Her principal has a framed copy of a magazine she's in on his wall. But as you get up into Trenton and further into the northeast quadrant, closer to New York City, there is not much of a gun culture left. It's been so successfully drummed out of people by the legislature and their scheme.
Dan, remind people how they can get in touch with the Recall Sweeney campaign.
It's recallsweeney.com. It's also on there's a Facebook page as well, or through the New Jersey Second Amendment Society Facebook page. And like I said, the kickoff event is next Saturday, the 27th, in Glassboro. The location will be released a few days beforehand so that we can try to minimize any infiltrators, which we fully expect.
Well, given it's New Jersey, they might take tractors and trailers and destroy the property if you give them any lead time.
Exactly. And then I'm going to continue to follow up on this Carol Bound case and continue to work towards revealing what I'm convinced is deliberately being covered up. I cannot, for the life of me, in any other state where something like this happened, you would have a county district attorney or you would have a state attorney general's office investigating the local police department. And that has not happened, and there's not even a whiff of that happening. I've also reached out to several state legislators and pleaded with them to take the opportunity to call for public hearings and a re-examination of the entire scheme of New Jersey gun control law, pointing out Carol Bound's murder, the Short Hill Mall murder 2 years ago at Christmas time that was a carjacking, the victimization of people like Shaneen Allen, Brian Aitken, a very old gentleman by the name of Van Gilder, I think it was. He had a
Gordon Van Gilder.
Didn't even fire. The last time the New Jersey gun control laws were reviewed in hearings was in 1986. I think everybody can agree it's well worth time to look at them again.
Dan, where can people find the articles that you write?
Ammoland.com. And I also always usually put up a link when it's published on my personal fan page.
I trust we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, absolutely.
And we're clear. Very cool.
I don't know what happened to Carl.
Thanks for joining us, Dan. I really do appreciate it, man.
Sure, no problem. It's a shame. I just realized I had something else that's kind of juicy. I have three independent sources. One is the former head of the State Police Firearms Unit. One was also a high-ranking officer in the Firearms Unit. One is a long-term civilian contractor for that same unit. All three of them have now independently confirmed that the only reason the State Police Firearms Unit acts as a portal to the federal NICS background check system was to create jobs within the state police under the Christine Whitman administration. That it has nothing to do with safety at all.
I'm writing that down as a note. I'll ask you because you're coming back next week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that next week.
Okay, because I'll be able to report on how the Recall Sweeney thing went too.
Sure. Absolutely.
No problem.
All right, man. Thanks again.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, and we're off of Skype. At least for that call.
I don't know what happened. Go ahead, John.
That was interesting because I'm a New Jersey expatriate. I grew up in New Jersey, and I still have family in New Jersey. It took my brother 9 months to get his permit to purchase a gun in his town. 9 months, and I had a gun that I was basically giving him. I had to FedEx it to an FFL and all that. Had to go through all the hoops, but it took 9 months for him to get his permit. He's not a criminal. He's got a job. It's crazy. That whole system is broken. And the law says you're supposed to get it in 30 days. That's the thing that kills me. And then they have a whole other campaign going on where they're making towns get rid of all their extraneous forms, because actually the New Jersey state law is very specific as to what forms you have to fill out. And then a lot of these either towns or cities add extra forms and extra hoops for people to jump through to get their purchase permits. And I think it's the ANJRPC actually has a project where they're actually going after all these towns, and they've won some court battles. So now they're putting people on notice, and pretty soon they're going to be going after the towns for basically professional malfeasance, blocking people from getting their permits. So there is some stuff good going on in New Jersey.
It's slow, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and record that news segment for Wednesday then?
Yep.
All right, Susan, you going to read?
What?
Are you going to read Wednesday's news
Sorry,
segment?
Okay, wait a minute.
Got a raise, man. I'm looking at new guns.
Okay, short bio break. I need a glass of water.
Do it. Are you in the show notes, sweetie?
Yeah.
Okay. It's if you scroll down to there's a thing that says for Wednesday show, and it starts with Cuomo creates total cluster in escape killers hunt. That's where we're going to start.
Gotcha.
You want to start, and it is Cuomo, although I've heard some people call him Kumo.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's Cuomo. That's the way they pronounce it in New York. Believe me, I heard it long enough when I was living there. For his father.
Yeah, I could never imagine living in New York or New Jersey.
No, that's why I'm in Texas.
Yeah, we got listeners.
I get the heck out of there.
Yeah, we got listeners in New York and New Jersey. We're actually really popular in New York and New Jersey. But I could never imagine living there.
No, I don't even go back to visit family if I can help it, frankly, because I don't want to be disarmed. And the government there is so corrupt, and it's set up to trap you in ways that you don't even imagine. So it's not worth it.
I should have asked you at the very beginning before we went on the air. Do you want me to introduce you as Dr. Edeen? Do you want
That's fine. Yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I refer to you, I figure it this way. You worked a long, long, hard road to get that title of doctor.
Yeah, 27 years of education before getting done.
So yeah,
and I'm still getting education. Frankly, there's no end to it.
Yeah.
So
I like using that title when I can with people that are doctors, because that thing doesn't come easy.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I take my doctoring very seriously. Believe me, you can ask the people where I work about the passion that I have with taking care of my kids. I'm very passionate about making sure everything's done right for my kids. And they're my kids. I take possession every time. Their parents give them over to me temporarily, and they belong to me until I give them back. But
I wish
every single one of my patients, is a gift to me that I take very, very seriously.
I wish we'd have had a doctor like you when our youngest son had a football injury.
Oh.
He broke his growth plate. The kid is at the time he was
6 foot.
No, he was 6 foot. He was 15 years old.
Correct.
6 foot tall. He eventually grew to be 6'4". But he was clipped and broke the growth plate.
Yeah, so of his femur right above his knee. Yeah.
Right.
I take care of those at least 1 or 2 a year. This is Texas. We have football, believe me. and I see these all the time.
They did not.
And unfortunately, there's about a 50% growth arrest rate with that fracture. But yeah, no, it can be difficult.
Just break the other leg?
We
Well,
eventually.
sometimes you stop the growth on the other side if it looks like they're getting an arrest. And I did that on a 12-year-old this past year. And, I put him back together a year later. It was obvious he had a big growth arrest. And so we just stopped the growth on the other side so that at least he's going to be a little shorter because you get about 9 millimeters a year of growth out of that growth plate. And boys stop growing at about an average of 16 and a half years of age. And so you end up being a little shorter, but you don't have one leg that's 2 inches longer than the other, which is the big problem. And they can still grow crooked. That's the other issue. You may still have to do something to correct the alignment. And sometimes when you have to do that, you can also gain a little length by doing a lengthening. But that's a much more complex procedure than stopping the growth on the other side.
Yeah, we ended up taking Mike to Mayo Clinic in Rochester.
Yeah, that's a good place. I mean, those are very good people there.
He has osteonecrosis.
Of a femur? I mean, like the femoral condyle?
Right.
Yeah. That's tough because at that age, the only thing you can do once you get it to heal, if you can get it to heal and they don't have a arthritis issue later on, so you're going to end up doing a knee replacement, at a young age. If they get a lot of collapse and they end up with early osteoarthritis, and that's bad news.
Well, he's still. This was 10 years ago. He still has some issues with it. It hurts a lot, especially he's got arthritis in it now. When the weather's cold and damp and icky, it really bothers him. Oh.
I mean, they can do injections with Synvisc and things like that. That may give him a little bit of temporary relief, but sooner or later, it's probably going to turn out to be a knee replacement. If you have X-rays, you can email them to me. I'd be happy to look at them for you.
I don't know if he has X-rays. I know we had some at one point in time.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find them.
Yeah, see if you can find them, and you can just send them to either my Gmail address or my AOL address, either one. I'll get it. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll be happy to look at them for you. At least tell you.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. That's what happens when you have a doctor in the family.
Well, that was not my original intent.
No, I know, but listen, we're all family, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I'm ready on my end. Everybody else ready to go for this news segment?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Dr. Edeen, you want to bring us in?
Hold on. Before you do that.
Okay. Holding.
And it's what is it, the Firearms Policy Coalition?
I'm getting it for you, John.
Okay.
I know you listen, but...
Yeah, it's easier to read it than it is to try to get it from your...
Thank you.
From your brain.
That's why.
Okay, are you there in the notes?
I'm in my notes. There it is. Let's see. Yep, I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, just bring us in and ask Susan what's our first story.
Okay.
All right, and we are rolling now.
Welcome back to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Susan, what's our next story?
Not only is New York Governor Mario Cuomo a rabid anti-gunner, a hard-left progressive, the head of an administration that's corrupt even by New York standards, and a publicity hound, he's now credited with creating a total
mess.
Charlie Foxtrot, no relation to our Charlie Foxtrot, of the hunt for two escaped murderers. With TV cameras in tow, Cuomo elbowed his way to the scene of the upstate New York prison escape. His unwelcome presence disrupted a crime scene only hours old. The ongoing search is hamstrung by competing agencies, bureaucratic infighting, and publicity-seeking officials. Heavily armed officers are bumbling about random patches of forest, often without coordination with other groups in the woods. Many are openly talking about the mess the search has become. As the murders remain at large for days, now weeks, the pressure on Cuomo grows. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
And where this relates to us is there are a lot of people in that area of New York that are saying, yeah, I got guns around, and no, the police haven't searched my place, but I have. A lot of people are taking responsibility for their own safety, and just kind of pushing the state to the side and making sure they and their families are taken care of. And I think that's cool.
Well, upstate New York is very different from New York City. It's much more rural, and the firearms community there is actually pretty strong, as opposed to what you see in Manhattan, Long Island, and the area surrounding New York City. Having grown up in that area, I can tell you that it's a very different mindset.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a knife law preemption bill which keeps cities and counties from enacting local knife laws. City laws such as those in Corpus Christi and San Antonio will be effectively repealed after September 1st. Cities are allowed to regulate possession of knives in schools, on government property, and at certain public events.
Yeah, well, I live in San Antonio, so I'm directly affected by this. In my everyday, I have to, I work in San Antonio but live in a small suburb, and I have to basically not be able to carry a knife. Any folding blade less than 5 inches is illegal, anything that can lock. So my question is, will the San Antonio City Council try to do something to restrict more gun use, knife use rather? They're going to probably try to restrict in the city buildings. The question is, can they do something with buses and public transportation, kind of like what Chicago does? I don't know whether they can get away with that or not, but we'll see.
Yeah.
John, every time somebody tells me about that we really need gun laws and, in a broader sense, weapon laws, I think of you. I can't help it. I go, here is a man who saves people's lives with sharp instruments every day, and you won't let him carry a pocket knife because he's too dangerous. One of you is insane.
Yep. And the knives I use at work are a lot sharper than what I carry in my pocket, I can tell you that.
I would imagine they are.
Please?
Yeah, the pocket knife doesn't quite do it for surgery, I can tell you that right now.
I don't stop it. My stomach's weak.
So then the old TV show, what is it, Emergency, that showed them using a pocket knife to do a tracheotomy, that's all science fiction?
Well, you probably can use it as a stabbing weapon, use it to stab in, but actually making incisions, it'd probably take 3 or 4 whacks with the knife in order to get through the skin, without damaging what's below it. I mean, that's the thing about surgery, is it's precision cutting. You can make a big cut with a knife all the way down to the trachea, but you're probably going to get muscle and carotid artery and maybe some thyroid, and that gets very bloody very quick.
Yeah.
In the good news category, Nevada has changed its reciprocity laws. They now recognize the concealed carry permits from 21 other states.
Unfortunately, South Dakota isn't one of them, darn it.
North Dakota is, I noticed.
Yes.
Nevada now recognizes the popular Arizona permit, but not Utah and Florida. The Nevada legislature also eliminated the handgun registration requirements in Clark County.
I thought of Gary when this law was finally passed. Clark County includes Las Vegas, where Gary used to live.
Mm-hmm. And where we go every year.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually got my Nevada concealed carry permit because I go to Front Sight fairly often, so I finally actually got one. Because they don't recognize Texas, or they didn't anyway. I don't know if Texas is in that list or not.
Yeah, I need to check, but last I checked, they did not recognize Texas.
Nope, they do not recognize Texas. But the Arizona permit is pretty easy, fellas.
Mm-hmm.
I plan on getting the Arizona permit when I get my Utah permit here next month.
Cool.
Good for you. Good for you. Hey, can I throw in a comment regarding the previous story?
Certainly.
I just realized I was on mute, so you didn't hear me. So, like, why are you talking over me?
Oops. We thought you were being awful quiet.
Yeah. So, just the background on that knife bill. There was another knife bill filed previously. It was actually HB 172. It was filed by Jonathan Stickland, who is my favorite rep still. He's the guy who filed constitutional carry and does a lot of great work there.
I love that guy.
Oh my goodness, he's amazing. He's great. He got hit pretty hard again by a lot of people this session. Everybody tries to block his bills. They don't like what he does. He still manages to do a lot of great things. What happened is he was pretty badly mistreated on his knife bill, HB 172. I was there at the hearing. They were trying to just delay his bill's hearing in favor of this other knife bill, which was a little bit weaker. His bill included pepper spray and mace spray, and at the end of the day, we were glad that a knife bill passed, although he definitely was mistreated there. So I wanted to give him a shout out. You know, a lot of what he does the radical thing that makes the other guys actually look less radical. So if he had not come forward and been really strong about trying to get his knife bill passed, I doubt that somebody else would have come forward with another knife bill that actually would have gotten passed. So that's kind of how he works.
So he did kind of the GOA, what GOA does for NRA.
Probably so.
Cool.
Rachel, do you have a list of the obstructionist legislators? Is that on your Texas Firearms Freedom website?
You could pretty much just go to the listing of representatives in the House, and pretty much everybody on there would be the obstructionist for Jonathan Stickland.
Okay. He's alone then.
Well, I shouldn't say that. Especially this session and even last session, he has some who really stick with him and really help him. Although even some of them are afraid to be seen with him because they don't want the stigma of getting all of their bills shut down. But he does have great support in his district. He was reelected this time. This is his second term. He should be reelected again next time. I'm hoping that he's going to want to run, that he's not burned out. But he has great support there. And the people in his district, that's in the Dallas or Tarrant County area in Fort Worth, I believe, they come down, they testify in hearings, they send people down, they watch his hearings. They provide him with amazing support. And I think that's why he's been able to keep going strong, because he knows they have his back at home.
Very, very cool. Susan, what's next?
As of July 1st, Indiana residents will be allowed to possess shotguns with a barrel length less than 18 inches. The owner will still have to have the proper federal Class 3 paperwork for short-barreled shotguns, which still makes no sense. Heck, Canadians can have short-barrel rifles and shotguns without asking for permission and paying a special tax.
Yeah, but us in the lower 48, we're special.
You know, I'm going to have to dig into it more because I just seen it briefly as I was preparing for today's show. But I thought I'd seen where full auto M16s in Canada were going to be going from prohibited to restricted. I will have to check up on that. Tell you what, we got Canadian listeners. Listeners up in Canada, shoot me a message. Let me know what's going on with that, and we'll talk about it on next week's show.
In the not-so-good news category, the digital ride-sharing company Uber now prohibits drivers and passengers from having weapons in its vehicles. Uber made the change back on June 10th. Both Uber and Lyft are rolling gun-free zones now.
So does each car come with a little plastic no gun sign on the window? Is the driver going to get up and wand me like a TSA checkpoint? I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
I don't want
you have to take off your shoes when you get in the cab, and then we'll
Right.
Well,
You got it.
just remove the belt, hold your glasses above your head, let me wand you. There you go.
I just don't want to get groped.
Yeah. Seriously, I don't want to get in a car when the thief knows I'm disarmed.
The thing with both of these companies is you use your car. The cab drivers, the cars you get in, folks, those are cars the individuals that drive them own. And it's
I'm sorry, I have a problem with somebody telling me I can't carry in my own car.
Yeah.
Well, okay, here's the magic. They are still a regulated company. They're fighting with they're working against regulated taxi companies. And if there's a city regulation board, Uber and Lyft can be pressured to do anything the regulators tell it to do.
Yeah, but we had a story in the DGU segment a month or so ago.
But this is probably the response to that, Paul.
Yeah, it could be, and let's all be aware that Uber is a San Francisco company, not exactly a haven for gun freedoms.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, I believe a business has the right to say, hey, we're going to be a gun-free zone. I think that's incredibly stupid, and I would not choose to ride with them. I think they do have that right. The drivers driving their own cars brings another dynamic into the issue, and that state law may even come into play there. Whether what's going to trump, your right to have a gun in your car, or your right to, or your employer's right to tell you if you can have a gun. I'm not really sure how that's going to come down everywhere, but yeah, it's their right to make a policy, and it's my right to tell them they're stupid, and I'm not going to do business with them.
I can well imagine that it can end up in a situation that we saw with pizza delivery drivers. It's your right to require it, that I be disarmed, and my right to get a job after I have to use it, and you fire me.
Yeah.
That could, yes,
Yeah.
very much.
And when are we going to hold these companies responsible? What if you're a worker that, your breadwinner gets killed because of their policy? Are they going to be held liable for their policy and not protecting their workers?
Bingo. You see, and that's where I think this should come into play.
Yeah,
where
we need to get
employers,
after these people. If you disarm me, then and something happens, you take responsibility. And if you're not providing adequate security, you're negligent.
Okay, so Rachel, you whisper into the ears of Texas senators. How about a bill that holds companies responsible if they disarm their employees, including Uber and Lyft?
That is actually something I'd love to see addressed. Not just specifically for this, but in general. I support private property rights, but I believe there should be heavy liability on them if they choose to disarm victims. So I think this would come under that too, and that would be good to include.
Hey, Rob, you were thinking of moving from California.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you should consider Puerto Rico. A class action lawsuit was brought by a group called the Ladies of the Second Amendment. They sued the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico to allow firearms purchase and carry without having to show good cause. The Commonwealth attorney argued that having arms is a privilege, not a right. The Intermediate Appellate Court ruled with the plaintiff, citing the Heller and McDonald cases. Puerto Ricans can now carry, open or concealed, without a permit, and they no longer need a permit to purchase a firearm. The court's ruling also abolished the gun registry in Puerto Rico. All firearms transactions will be handled in accordance with U.S. firearms regulations.
We had Sandra Barrera of the Second Amendment, women's, on the Ladies of the Second Amendment on. It's been a couple years ago. It was back when it was me, myself, and I. And I'm thinking we should reach out and have her on again. Great news. Came really unexpectedly because Puerto Rico essentially up to now has been New Jersey, but worse. And this good news is, it's coming out all over the place. We had Ed Levine on last week talking about non-resident permits in Washington, D.C. He finally did pick up his D.C. carry permit. Now, unfortunately, the court imposed, after they sent him the letter that he talked about last week, they imposed a stay on D.C., so they're again denying carry permits to us, mere mortals.
It would be interesting to see what the crime statistics are in Puerto Rico after about a year, because Puerto Rico was a pretty crime-ridden area because it was basically a gun-free zone for the average citizen, and the criminals were running rampant. So I would be interested to see a year from now if this thing sticks and that they don't appeal it to another level and get it stayed and all the other kind of shenanigans that they pull, what would happen in Puerto Rico. It might actually become a paradise again.
Susan and I, we do a lot of traveling, and we have in the past thought of going to Hawaii. My major sticking point has always been we're defenseless there. Well, I'm wondering if maybe in a year or so, Puerto Rico might substitute for that Hawaii trip.
Might. I'll have to talk to our favorite travel agent.
Exactly.
I've been there, and it's a beautiful place. You get up in the mountains in the rainforest, it's absolutely gorgeous. And the beaches are fantastic.
What we were thinking was a extension of our. We go every January to the gun rights, or not to gun rights policy, to SHOT Show every January, and that's right in the time of year where here in Sioux Falls it's traditionally the coldest. I mean, 20, 30 below is not unheard of that time in January. So we were thinking a week at SHOT Show and then a week in a tropical area. Well, Puerto Rico is pretty tropical.
Yeah, oh, it's beautiful.
Representative Carolyn Maloney, Democrat, New York, has found her niche, the underside of the gun control rock. This legislative session, she has authored bills on the so-called gun show loophole, with a hidden registration requirement, a gun liability insurance mandate, funding for CDC anti-gun studies, and now the Handgun Act. This bill would require all new handguns to utilize smart gun technology within 5 years, and the retrofit of all handguns within 10. The fact that acceptable smart gun technology doesn't exist is probably not a bug, but a feature to her. Fortunately, the above bills don't have a snowball's chance in hell of passage in the Republican-controlled House. Perhaps her puppet masters have other objectives. They may be laying the foundation for when the political pendulum swings to the left again. More likely, they're hoping to get these ideas out to the states and cities. Once there, each anti-gun law must be fought individually, straining the resources of the pro-rights organizations. This could be gun bans by 1,000 cuts. As always, support your local, state, and national gun rights organizations. They're gonna need it.
Amen. We don't run it as often as we used to, but we have what we call a show read, where we list all of the national and state organizations that we support. And maybe we should bring that back and start reading that live and build that list again.
I'm a member of TSRA and also the New Jersey groups too, because I'm a New Jersey boy and I still have family there, so I support them.
I am a member of the New Jersey Second Amendment Society. I am a member of the NRA. I'm a member of I'm a lifetime member of the Second Amendment Foundation. I've got a lot of memberships, and I hope our listeners do too.
Yeah, we need to support with not only our voices, but with our dollars.
Which means at least as much as our voices.
Absolutely.
Speaking of puppet masters, our old friend Michael Bloomberg is at it again. That nasty little fascist, that nasty little bugger, thank you, Michael Bain, is using his billions to try and change the debate on guns in America. Bloomy is funding a media organization to distribute news about guns, and of course, impart that unique Bloomberg spin to the news. New York's Capitol said the state will be the editorial arm of Bloomberg's Everytown for Gun Safety. He obviously hopes to become a reference source for mainstream media, like the now largely discredited Brady Bunch was in the past.
Well, I don't see anything that can. He's going to dump his money, and he's going to dump his money, and he can try and change the conversation all he wants. What he can't change is the facts.
Right. Thank you, John Lott, for having the facts readily available so we can beat them down. I mean, that's part of what DRGO does. You know, whenever they come up with these phony medical studies, we beat them back down. A lot of times we use John Lott's facts to do it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and do our gun quote for this episode, and I'm pulling a surprise on everybody because I just pulled this up. So I'll go ahead and take it. A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious. but it cannot survive treason from within, as an enemy at the gate is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly, but the traitor moves against those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears to be not a traitor, he speaks in accents familiar to his victims. He wears their face and their arguments. His appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so that it can longer resist. A murderer is less to fear. That was Cicero in 428 BC. Hang on, everybody. We're going to get to our interview segments. We've got Gary Slider of handgunlaw.us, and we've got Ken Blanchard, Black Man with a Gun. Both those interviews are coming up right after this.
Sorry, your wife's an idiot, and I can't see.
Okay. Goodness. I think we're just going to have to. I'm going to have to edit that mention of
Carl Chin.
Chin out, because you haven't heard from anything, have you?
I just checked my email, and I checked to see if it went into spam. He was on Skype, but he never showed.
Okay. All right. Well.
No, never got any information.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and mention again our advertisers before we take the show off.
Hey, hold on. I think I have a mobile. You want me to try and let me try and call his cell.
Okay, but I've got to. If you get through, I've got to be the one to call him if I get it. So
I know.
Okay. Yeah, do it quick. Yep. Hey, watch it, you.
Hey, Rachel, while we got some dead time, do you ever make it out to the Fredericksburg shoots?
I do. I shoot boss their lady seeds, and I've gone to several others, but it's been
Hi,
quite a
Carl.
while.
We thought we were going to hear from you for the Polite Society podcast. We'll try again next week.
Voicemail.
Hey, guys.
Okay.
All right, let me mention here quick, since we're not going to be able to do that interview then. People, please go to our advertisers: Concealment Solutions, Crusader Weaponry, New Jersey Second Amendment Society, Firearms Safety Institute, and the Firearms Policy Coalition. They're the ones that keep this show coming to you. I couldn't do it on my own anymore if they weren't for these sponsors. And please show me your appreciation. We're going to be back next week. It seems that Google's kind of got their stuff together and gave us a pretty decent connection this time. So without many technical problems, we're going to go ahead and go off the air. We're going to have a private conversation here for a few minutes, and we will see you all next week.